I think in the church, we've tended to think of the danger mainly as inappropriate or immoral content.
Sure.
So we say, all right, cut out the porn, cut out the sex, the bad language, the violence, and we're A-okay.
Right.
What a lot of people in the church don't understand it's not only the type of the unhealthy content, it's the sheer volume, the amount of time that we're placing our eyeballs fixed on our screens. Our eyes are no longer fixed on Jesus. They are fixed on Facebook. They are fixed on the internet. They're fixed on Amazon. They're fixed on Netflix. And what we see 8, 9, 10 hours a day is discipling us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families better love God and use tech. I love that introduction by David because what he is talking about is exactly what we need to hear, that what we are watching, where we are putting our eyes and our minds, where we're giving our hearts is what's discipling us. And in many cases, it's technology we're not even thinking about, right? It's just how we go about our lives. And yet those influences, those words, those visuals, those influential people that we follow or that we dedicate our minds and hearts to are actually impacting us. They're discipling us in the way we're going to go, whether we should go there or not. So what we're going to do today is have a conversation with David about his new book coming out. It's called Drowning in Screen Time. And while it is a little bit of a pessimistic title, I get that. It is not a gloom and doom conversation. This isn't going to be about why you need to throw your cell phone in a lake or move out into the woods and not talk to anybody, but instead is how can we intentionally turn our eyes back to Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, and how can we faithfully raise up kids who are not scared of tech, but also don't serve it, who can actually go and love God and use tech. So I'm excited for this conversation. I hope it's an encouragement to you. And I think with that, let's get this conversation started. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. Today, we get to speak with David Murrow. David, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And David just is writing a book. It's coming out in December. What's the official release date, David?
It's December the 28th, which happens to be the 125th anniversary of the first screen presentation. The very first screen presentation was by the Lumiere brothers in Paris on December the 28th, 1895. They screened the first film for a paying audience. They paid a few francs to come in, watch this movie, instant hit. And so we scheduled our release date to coincide with that.
With that, I guess I'd love to hear just a little bit about David Murrow.
Okay, well, this book is a new direction for me. My last 4 books have been about men in church, including my bestseller, which is Why Men Hate Going to Church. It kind of got me into this whole mess. Yeah. And then, I've also, my day job is television production. I've been in the screen production business almost 4 decades now. And I felt like there was a need for an insider's story, just to kind of let people know, hey, these are the things that those of us who work in screen business know. These are the tricks of the trade. These are the things we're doing to manipulate your brain and get you all worked up and excited and think that it's the end of the world. This is how we put you into the matrix. Right. And so I've wrote from that insider's perspective.
I actually saw that it's a chapter in your book, right? Is the From Inside the Matrix, or I remember exactly the title.
Well, yeah. The book starts out with 5 parables. One of them is based on the movie The Matrix.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so from that, you went writing from Why Men Hate Church, and how we can effectively reverse some of that, right? How do we then engage men where they're at and show them that this is
right,
both good for their souls and good for their families, and an intentional direction too. Writing about this. So with your personal life, I guess, how do you see that overlap from your work of like, hey, I know what we're doing. What kind of inspires you for this greater work? I mean, why do anything in addition to your production work?
That's a great question. I guess it's just the old-fashioned sense of call. There are a lot of secular voices that are speaking into this space right now. There's this The Social Dilemma, which is on Netflix right now, an excellent documentary about what's really going on with our screens and what they're doing to us. But seems to be a lack of Christian voices or voices speaking specifically to the Christian audience.
Hmm.
I think in the church, we've tended to think of the danger mainly as inappropriate or immoral content.
Sure.
So we say, all right, cut out the porn, cut out the sex, the bad language, the violence, and we're A-okay.
Right.
What a lot of people in the church don't understand it's not only the type of the unhealthy content, it's the sheer volume, the amount of time that we're placing our eyeballs fixed on our screens. Our eyes are no longer fixed on Jesus. They are fixed on Facebook.
Hmm.
They are fixed on the internet. They're fixed on Amazon. They're fixed on Netflix. And what we see 8, 9, 10 hours a day is discipling us. And so that's my sort of my reason for getting into this is it's not just about, oh yeah, let's cut out the porn and we're A-okay. We've
Right.
really got to focus on the amount of time that we're devoting to these platforms and put our eyes back on real life and the things that really matter.
Yeah. No, it's huge. I think two things that you just said that just resonated with me is that there's so much more than being like safe and happy, right? Like
Yeah.
that's so long been what it is. Well, they're safe, right? And they enjoy
Right.
it. So we're good, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not the devil. They could be doing worse things, right? Like that's kind of
Right. Yeah.
that could be the line of logic we use, but they're like, no, like just what you said, the volume, right? Whether it's the 9 hours a day or whatever it is that you want to look at. And then the second piece is I love that in the entirety of the social dilemma, at no point does Netflix get brought up. And we're like, you guys realize that Netflix, who's producing this, is also part of the conversation. So
yeah, right. But see, Netflix has a different economic model. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet. So they actually don't care whether you stream them or not. There are no ads supporting Netflix. So that's why Netflix released that. You can bet Google would never have released The Social Dilemma.
Yeah, that is true. When you pay, right? If Instagram or something was a subscription service and they weren't tracking everything you did and they just let you pay and then they rolled with it. That's true. There is that.
That would be different. Yeah. So kudos to Netflix on one level.
On one level. That's let it be noted.
One level.
We are acknowledging them with one positive kudo. All right.
Yeah,
just the one. And so then your line of work is production by day. You're the Batman of writing and speaking.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm the Bruce Wayne of video production. I've owned my own production company in Alaska for over 30 years. And so I felt that it was really time for an insider's account. There's a lot of books out there on screen time right now. Many of them are written by psychologists, social scientists, professors. But not many have been written by people who actually work in the screen business. And so I felt like it was time to pull back the veil, the curtain a little bit, and just tell you folks the tricks that we use in this business to keep your eyes fixed on the screen, why it's so hard to turn the TV off, why it's so hard to put down social media. You know, we those of us who work in television and screen content, web content, are manipulating your brain. We know how your brain works, we know what it wants, and we give it to you. And that's one of the things that I reveal in the book is how these technologies are actually changing our brains and we're responding, and it's a very unhealthy thing that's going on.
Yeah, and I guess let's just dive right into that. I mean, that's without spoiling the book. Obviously, we want people to get the whole of the conversation, but to really walk in through, we hear that a lot. I mean, there's a ton of stuff on, like just what you mentioned. There's a lot of scary stuff when it comes to the research, right? We can read The Shallows, or we can read Glow Kids, or we can watch The Social Dilemma and come away just afraid. But if you were to condense some of that conversation for our listeners, what are kind of the 1 to 2 things they should know as an informed engager of information through social media and video mediums? What do they need to know in order to not just be victims of the onslaught?
Okay, so let me step back just a little bit. One of the before I get into what you asked, one of the things you need to know about my book is I wrote it based on 5 parables. I'm a big fan of parables. There was this early Christian teacher by the name of Jesus who liked them a lot. He used them often. I thought, gosh, if his parables change the world, maybe mine can change a few ideas, a few minds. So one of the parables that I actually took from the Bible. And if I can just share it with you real quick, I want you to imagine you're a poor shepherd boy named David, and you play the harp and you practice your slingshot. And every day you take your sheep out to the pasture to find green pastures and beside still waters. And that's your job every day. You lead your sheep out, you lead your sheep in. And during your whole life, almost nothing unusual happens. But then one day, you hear a sheep cry out and you look and there's a wolf. And the wolf is taking one of the lambs away. And so you have this whole big metabolic process that revs up your brain and your body chemistry, and you reach into your pouch and you grab one of those slingshot rocks and you fling it at the wolf and you hit the wolf in the side, and he drops the lamb and you run to the lamb and pick the lamb up. And during this whole process, you experience this intense flood of hormones, and actually the pleasure center of your brains just goes crazy over your victory. So, and then you go back to day after day after day of nothing unusual happening. So this is the normal way life has always been: 98% monotony and 2% novelty. With our screen content, what has happened is we have completely flipped that natural script. Now our lives are 90% novelty and only 10% monotony. We can see new things all the time, every moment of every day. And the reason those things are so attractive to us is because our brains are designed to respond to novelty. Young David, the shepherd boy, his brain doesn't go crazy when he sees a rock or a pile of sheep dung or a fly or a tree. His brain goes crazy when he sees a wolf, because a wolf is novel. It's something new, right? Our brains go crazy now because we see new things all the time. Our brains were not designed to be stimulated every waking moment, yet that's what we're doing. And we're seeing unprecedented levels of depression and anxiety and uncertainty. And people think, oh, it's because of all this nasty screen content. No, it's because our brains are never resting. Our brains are running marathons every day, constantly revved up by all the novelty we're feeding into them, this constant pleasuring of our brains. And it's really wrecking us for just real life pleasure of walking down a street and seeing the clouds and, doing the things that David used to do for pleasure, plucking his harp or practicing his slingshot. We can't do those things anymore because our brains are habituated to this constant flood of novelty.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would then lead us to this point where we're like, all right, like that's then how production companies and social media and modern tech engages us, is by constantly giving us the new, the interesting, the attractive.
Yeah, exactly. The wolves, that's the analogy I use in the book. They are constantly trotting out wolves to stimulate our brains, to make us notice, because we don't remember trees, we don't notice trees, we notice wolves.
Right.
And so what are some of these wolves? The corrupt politicians, dishonest pastors, sex scandals, every controversy you can imagine, conspiracy theories, all these things get trotted out because they're wolves. They get our nervous system worried about things. And so politicians are no more corrupt than they've ever been. Pastors are not more dishonest or sexually abusive than they've ever been, right? But we have this medium that constantly presents these failures to us. These dishonest businessmen and all these horrible things. These wolves get trotted out all the time. And so what happens is we begin to believe the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Right. Because these things always happened in the past, but we never really knew about them. Which leads me to my next parable, which is called the parable of the Matrix. Have you seen the movie called The Matrix?
I sure did. That one blew my mind because it came out when I was in high school, and my face melted upon watching. It was like, whoa, the blue pill or the red pill? What's happening?
Yeah. The Matrix is actually a parable of what is happening to us with our screens. The screens are presenting a world to us that is going to hell. This hellscape. It's saying the world is awful. Why do you think people are marching in the streets? We need change right now. We live in the most peaceful, prosperous society ever conceived in history. Yet our screens tell us we're living in this awful place that has to be changed because there's all this injustice and there's all these people dying, and they're telling us this story that we live in this bad place. Now, why do they tell us this? Because these are wolves. These get our attention. After your brain gets so revved up and so upset, what do? They hand you off to watch a movie to soothe your brain. That's why every media conglomerate has two divisions. They have a news division to get you upset, and then they have an entertainment division to calm you down. And along the way, advertisers sell your attention to the highest bidder.
Which is terrifying to hear, right? Like everyone listening to this can think of a time where they heard bad news to the point where they couldn't handle, especially in the last year, right? I don't think any of us have to think back far to go, I remember reading that article or watching that video, right? And like getting super stressed out and going, oh my goodness, like I can't go to bed right now. Like I need to unplug. I need to relax, which almost inevitably, some people that might be go for a run, read a book, but for many of us, it's I'm going to binge watch that British baking show, right? Like I want to get just mental calories in so that I forget that what's happening right now. And so I think a lot of us can connect with that. I guess I have like 6 questions I want to do off that, but I guess what would your caution be for us? How can we be better aware of the wolves and what should we do about it? Like we can't stop them from trotting the wolves out. And we can't stop from getting angry when we see like we're getting worked up one way or the other when we see a wolf. So what do we do?
Okay, first of all, you have to recognize that there are a lot of people who are very wolf aware. If you think about our ancestors, who survived? The caveman, or the shepherds, or the hunters and gatherers, who survived? The suspicious people survived. The ones who noticed the wolves, and they passed their genes on to us, right? The trusting people got eaten. So you have to recognize that, recognizing wolves is it's an adaptation. It's a way of surviving. So one of the things you have to do is you have to fight fire with fire. You have to recognize that you are being manipulated by these media companies. You have to know the facts about the world, that we do live in a pretty darn good time when there is abundant food. We have armies to protect us. Yes, there's injustice in the world, but it's certainly more just than it was, say, 400 years ago or even 100 years ago. We have to recognize the progress that we've made as a society. And so when we do hear bad news, we also have to recognize the fact, okay, the reason I'm hearing that bad news, that I'm hearing about that dishonest businessman or that pedophile priest or that these things that are causing us to mistrust everyone or mistrust authority and institutions. We have to recognize the reason we are hearing that is because there is a media that is sending us, that is magnifying the misdeeds of a very small number of people and then generalizing that to the large population. So, it's going to take more than just a casual, oh, I recognize this. People are going to have to be trained. They're going to have to, if I were doing like an 8-week course, in a church or whatever, that would be the message I would be hammering home: how to be a discerning screen content viewer, a media viewer. You have to understand, put these things in context, because if you're just absorbing the wolves as they're trotted out, you're going to think the world is full of wolves. And that's a very frightened place to be.
So in the book, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell, he kind of walks through this process where he says, hey, like this is what's going on. And he uses the example of the pyramids, the Ponzi scheme, Bernie Madoff, and the Ponzi scheme, and kind of talking about like the guy who caught him was super suspicious. But our problem is that when we are that suspicious, we become cynical about everything. And so, so we have this difference of like, I'm being made anxious by what I see online because I'm getting my news feed from an algorithm, or I'm getting my news feed from my social media or whatever. So I'm super anxious, and I'm now in this mode of I consume a bunch till I'm anxious, and then I escape a bunch until I forget, and I rinse and repeat.
Yeah, let me tell you, one of the most disturbing studies I came across in my research is a recent study, I believe it was 2019, from Gallup. And they polled people in different age groups about their trust, how much they trust other people. Among people my age and older, this would be people in the boomer generation, only about a third would be called low trusters, highly suspicious of others, agreeing with statements like everyone's out to get me, or everybody's out for their own good and I can't trust people. So that's only about a third, 36%, I think it was, were low trusters. Among millennials and Gen Z, 73% were low trusters. This upcoming generation, having been nurtured on wolves, provided daily, hourly over the internet, they are coming to see the world as a place that is out to get them. And people, and institutions especially can't be trusted. And this withdrawal from institutions is causing them not to marry, not to join churches, not to join the military, not to volunteer. Everyone is withdrawing into their own safe bubble of social groups and stuff. And the pandemic's only made it worse because now it's even dangerous to socialize. Those few friends that they had, those are out the window now too. So what we've got is we've got the most isolated, suspicious generation that we've ever raised. And all those suspicions have come to us via our screens.
And what's the end game on that? When you have 3/4 of a population who says, no, those people out there can't be trusted. Like,
you know, when Ted Turner invented the 24-hour news cycle in 1980, when he launched CNN, I don't think he had any idea he was undermining trust in America, in world institutions. Yeah. But that's exactly what has happened. The end game, when you have a society where only 27% of a generation trusts their neighbors, trusts institutions, I don't know how we can cohere as a society. I've been very proud of the reaction to the election so far. We're recording this just a couple of days after the presidential election, and there was predictions of riot in the streets and all these sorts of things. So far, so good. The worst thing I've seen is there's a lack of toilet paper at the local grocery store.
And there is, yes.
Have you noticed that?
Yes. We went to our local Costco, and we're like, what are all these people doing here? We're like, oh, they're all buying the toilet paper again. Great.
Yeah, awesome. No, don't even try Costco. I mean, White Cloud, Angel Soft, they're all gone. But anyway, one wonders if a society that is so divided and so mistrustful of each other can persevere. And what's interesting is other countries know this as well. Russian trolls, Iranian trolls, Chinese trolls. There are people using online platforms to deliberately stir up opposition and to advance extremist agendas. The Russians are actively undermining a lot of technology like 5G, vaccinations, these sorts of things that would bring health and higher technology advances. They're falsely linking them to autism and cancer and these sorts of things. Why? Because they want Americans not to vaccinate themselves and not to use these technologies. They want them to be afraid of them so that the Russians can vault ahead of us. And it's just a diabolical agenda that they're pushing, this fear, these wolves they're trotting out to make us not advance as a society and to turn on one another.
Which would sound like a tinfoil cap conspiracy theory, right? I mean, like to say things like, well, the Iranians or the Chinese are out there, but like, these are things we now have like well documented. Like it started 4 years ago, like we believe Trump's campaign was helped by the Russians, right? That was the whole thing. They're like, well, we found these fake, and then the further you dig in, you're like, oh no, like this is rampant. Like they're just making things about cops and making fake groups and tens of thousands of people are joining, and like, that there's misinformation and disinformation. I had a chance to speak to a guy who worked for, we'll put it in quotation marks, the State Department. And he put in a decade with the agency. And I asked him, like, if you could have one weapon, just one weapon, and it would work, what weapon would you want? He's like, I would want the ability to tell someone something and have them believe me.
The Russians or whoever these actors are, they know that we have people, and they play on those suspicions, and they know those folks are hanging out on social media, and they're going to repost what these trolls have posted. I mean, of all these sources to uncover this, it was Rolling Stone magazine that did an excellent expose. Rolling Stone, that accurate, they're so accurate, but they did a 2018 article that was very well received and has been checked and is accurate. A 2-year investigation into Russian troll farms, and those folks are spending millions of rubles trying to get us upset each other by appealing to our sense of tribalism, and they're actively doing that, and they have been able to exploit Christians by floating a lot of right-wing conspiracy theories that, if you think about them, you go, this can't possibly be true. But in the heat of the moment, you think, well, of course it's true. It kind of goes along with the whole Christian story of, well, there's a Satan, there's this evil force behind it. And so, of course, everyone in the Democratic Party is a pedophile, and they're secretly covering up all these, I mean, it
Pizza
just kind of
Huts.
goes with that they're operating out of pizza places. And
Yeah.
if you're like, oh, where does this come from? Well, it comes from Russia. It comes from different troll factories. And if my message to the church is, you are being manipulated. Yes, there is an evil one, and yes, he's out there, but he's not necessarily doing it to this degree. These accusations are false. We need to be looking out for the real evil one, and not
Sure.
these false things that are being put out there.
Yeah, and I guess that leads me to kind of twofold. We'll tackle these in order, I guess. The first would be, what is this level of anxiety? I mean, you just described the heart of most of our information consumption, right? Is that
Mhm.
much of it is, if not false, it is the things that we're looking at that are real have been augmented by what is false, right? The amount of vitriol and anger and defensiveness
Yeah.
that people are feeling is because there is so much misinformation and disinformation that they're now finding. So how does that level of anxiety impact our families, our relationships? And then I would love to hear I would love to kind of tie that in with the gospel as well. Like, what does that look like then to be someone who believes the good news that God saves sinners? Like, how do we make sense of any of this and move forward? So first on the anxiety and
Yeah.
relationships part.
Okay. Well, let me clarify something you said. Most of the information on the web is true. Well, it's not that it's completely false. It's not like, okay, aliens invaded my house last night. It's not.
Right.
It's not like that. What it is it's true information, but it's spun in such a way to get you upset. Or, one of the biggest offenders in the mainstream media is the Washington Post. I call them out in my book during the early days of the coronavirus. They were predicting, millions dead, and grocery workers dying. The frozen food aisle in the grocery store filled with corpses. And I mean, they weren't giving any context. That's called spin. Yes, there's a coronavirus. Yes, it's killing people, but they spun it in such a way that it was wolfy as possible to get you all panicked and worried. So that's the first thing you need to understand. Most of the stuff you see on the internet is true, but it's spun. It's spun to one agenda or another. And especially if you frequent, right-wing sites like Breitbart, or left-wing sites like Mother Jones, or those sorts of sites, you're going to get the same story told from a left or right perspective. And you need to understand, you need to recognize what spin is. It's designed to get you spun up and get you upset. Now, the impact that has on the family, as parents, we have to teach our kids to be discerning about what they read on social media and what they see. When your kid comes to you and he says, wow, did you know that Hillary Clinton is involved in a secret pedophile ring? You need to be ready to say, okay, son, why do you believe that? And take him back there and show you the source. Okay, this is not a legitimate website. This is actually a Russian troll site. You have to patiently explain to him that what he's reading it may be interesting, but it may not be true. Today, there's such a proliferation of both, news outlets that are way over on both the left and the right. Some are on the crazy left, some are on the crazy right. And we just have to teach our kids to be discerning and to know what's spin and what's real.
Yeah. What's one tip we can give our parents right now to help them understand? Because parents are struggling with that, right? Like, as adults, our
Yeah,
digital intelligence is sometimes muddled by our desire to believe it, or I don't know. I feel like a lot of people aren't getting even news source. Like, when you go, well, where did you hear that? They'll say, well, it's person on Instagram, right? Or this YouTube account that I follow, or this, right? Like,
right,
that's where a lot of our information is coming now. It's not, well, I can't trust those main sources because they're owned by Rupert Murdoch, or they're owned by this other
right.
conglomerate. So that's paid information. I'm basically just listening to ads. I need the real stuff. And so how can we gauge whether the earth is flat or whatever it is for us, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there's a helpful chart that I forget the website that it's on. If you type into a search engine media bias chart,
okay.
that will kind of show you which outlets lean left and right and which go down the middle. You should try to be consuming the ones down the middle as much as possible.
Yeah.
You also need to discern the difference between straight news and opinion. Okay.
Okay.
Opinion is opinion. Straight news is supposed to be straight news. Now,
Right.
most mainstream media lean left in their straight news. The assumptions that they bring, well, of course, Bruce Jenner is a woman. I mean, the assumptions they bring to their reporting are not the assumptions that many conservative or evangelical Christians bring to their reading. So you need to be discerning of that. You know that you're going to get your straight news from the New York Times with a dash of liberalism. I still read the New York Times because I still want to know how folks think on both sides of this of the spectrum. As far as advice to parents, if you're the suspicious type and you're the type who believes in conspiracy theories, then I would just challenge you to repent. I would challenge you to do the research, to learn what's true and what's not. Be careful before you post. And if you look at that media bias chart, I would say if you're going to repost something, make sure it's from a legitimate source. Don't repost crazy things from, Joe Blow on YouTube or QAnon or, just QAnon is one guy who just started this wild conspiracy theories and he's got like 1 million viewers and stuff. Nobody's checking him. He doesn't have reporters going out and finding the facts on the ground. He's just spewing crazy stuff. And a lot of Christians believe that because it kind of goes with our narrative that there's a Satan out there. Well, of course, Satan would be causing a giant pedophile ring out of pizza parlors. That would be exactly what Satan would do, right? Except only he's not,
Yeah.
So be careful with that sort of thing. One piece of advice, the biggest piece of advice I would give to parents regarding screen content is you have to model healthy screen use yourself.
Okay.
I tell parents that every screen in the house needs to be turned off at dinner time and left off the rest of the evening. That would be the best way to get family time back. So if you eat dinner at the table, make sure the TV is turned off, make sure the phones are parked, everything's on their chargers by then, and do the whole evening without any screen time. If you can do that, you're probably 80% of the way back to a healthy family dynamic. What you want to avoid is what MIT professor Sherry Turkle calls being alone together. And that's where everyone gets their own screen, retreats to their corner of the house, and they're together physically, but their minds are in cyberspace. So I say the easiest way to solve that is to shut the screens off at dinner, put the phones on their charger, and that's where they stay until the morning.
What do you think is going to be the outcome of that for us? Like, so we are aware. Oh, I guess let me walk that back a little bit. You mentioned kind of get your information from legitimate sources. I think I just wanted to put a note in there. So as Christians, we are called to be wise as serpents, innocent as doves. We are not called to simply be trusting of everything that comes across our table, but also to be engaging the culture. Right? We're in the world, we're not of it. This is not our final resting place. And yet the people in it who are being misled are people God died for, or Jesus, died for and rose again and now lives for, and we are called to go serve and love. So I think I just want to repeat for our listeners that I love that idea of being intentional with the information we engage, being loving and thoughtful. You mentioned, like, think twice before you post that, before you comment on that, before you lash out about that.
Right.
And I think I would just especially add this idea of there is a difference between bias and lies. So I think it's very important to recognize, like, New York Times versus the Wall Street Journal, they can both have very good reporting. They can just be biased. They can make certain assumptions about what their audience is going to believe, and they just run with those assumptions. Neither of them are lying about that. But there does come a point where someone's just bold-faced, either not telling you all the information you need or making stuff up. And it's just a fabrication, and they're going off conjecture. And
let me, probably the best example in electronic media would be the two networks, Fox News Channel, which a lot of right-wingers, a lot of Christians watch the Fox News Channel. It's the most popular news channel. And then there's MSNBC, which is the kind of the left-wing funhouse mirror of Fox News Channel, right? Yeah. Both of them are very careful to get their facts straight. I mean, even on election night, Fox News called some states for Biden, and it made viewers mad, but they were just reporting the facts straight as they could, okay? Yeah. Even though it angered their audience of conservatives who wanted to see Trump win. Yeah. So that's an example of these two networks spin the truth to their target audiences, but they're not going to out and out lie to you. A lot of the content, like InfoWars and, this, or there's some, stuff way out on the left, they are lying to you. So yeah, you have to understand the difference between bias and lying. And there's really no harm, if you're a conservative, there's no harm in watching Fox News, because you're going to hear stories that kind of make you feel good about what you already believe. Same thing if you're a left-winger and you watch MSNBC, you're going to get the news delivered with a left-wing accent. The nice thing is they're not going to out and out. They're not going to tell you a hurricane didn't hit Mexico, but they're not going to tell you, they're not going to tell you something that's absolutely false, but they are going to tell you the story from their perspective. It's going to, for instance, there's a court case coming up that is to the Supreme Court. The city of Philadelphia stopped allowing Catholic services place orphans in homes because they didn't allow for lesbian and gay parents. Okay. So that same story on Fox News is going to be told in terms of religious freedom, and on MSNBC it's going to be in terms of LGBT rights, right? Same story, same facts, but they're going to spin it one way or the other to make their key audiences happy.
Right. Thank you for kind of clarifying that. And that's wonderful to have your perspective on that as well, seeing the way these strings get pulled to bring it in. So then I guess my question moving in from that would be, let's take it from, we went big picture. Let's make this a little more personal. In your book, you talk a little bit about your kind of experience with, I believe you describe it as tech addiction. Would you walk us through, like, what does that look like for you? And then how did you get to the spot where you aren't currently processing that? And what can our viewing audience, adult and young people, what can they learn from that?
Well, I'm the son of a screen addict. We bought a television. My dad bought his first television a few months before I was born. And if we were awake, the television was on. We started each day with the Today Show and we ended each day with the Tonight Show. So if we were home, the TV was on, and I hated that. And so as soon as I got out of the house, I went to college, didn't have a TV in college, never watched it. Was very proud of the fact that I had defeated my father's addiction. Ironically, I went into the television business. Long story there, but for about 20 years, I produced more television than I watched. I did a lot of commercials, documentaries, and specials, but I never sat down and watched TV. Then in about 2003, my addiction came calling in the form of a laptop computer and Wi-Fi. Those were new things. And now I could sit in my chair just like my dad had. And instead of watching, 7 or 8 channels that came in on the antenna, I could look at hundreds of websites and dozens of news sites, and I could read email, and I could look at pictures. There was no social media yet, but I had all these things. And guess what? I became just as addicted to my screens as my father had been. And it hurt my relationship with my kids and my wife. She called it my silver mistress. My PowerBook G4 was my silver mistress. And it got so bad that they actually had to have an intervention with me. And I had to, get some counseling and figure out why it was that I was retreating from my family, my precious children. And it turns out that I just had some emotional issues that I hadn't dealt with from my childhood, and I was following in my father's footsteps. So long story, even longer. I finally, after getting that counseling, came to realize that I needed to very forcefully cut off my screen addiction and put severe limits on the amount of time I spent on screens. And I still fall into it. When I got an iPhone, I started playing a couple of video or games on my phone. Have you tried Words with Friends?
I have. Well, I mean, I know what it is. I haven't played it personally. Yes, my middle school students play it.
Play it. Yeah. Stop now. It's very addicting because I love word games. I'm a writer. I love words. And I figured, well, I was playing about, 20, 30 minutes a day. And then I got my first screen time account, and I had blown 12 and a half hours that week playing Words with Friends. And so I had to delete the game and disappoint the people that I had been playing with. That's how they manipulate you, right? Oh, don't. The text messages come up. Hey, your friend just played a game. Hey, they just played a 36-point word on you. Get in there. And you can't not play. You have to delete it from your phone. Right. So anyway, it's been a long road back to screen health and sanity, but I'm happy to say now that I have a very balanced screen life, and there's plenty of time for real life and my kids and my family.
Parents, we do have the opportunity to intercede in love, right? Where it's not, man, I'm scared of these games. That might be something bad, so we're just going to lock ourselves in a closet. It's, I can see that this is a problem, and I'm going to lovingly step into that person's life, because to allow them to continue to get drug away from their purpose in Christ, to use another one of your parables, the beach analogy that you use, right? To get drug away, is unloving, right? To simply allow that to happen and go, well, I don't want them to get mad at me, or I don't want to cause rift, or maybe I just don't understand. That's one of the things I hear a lot from parents is, this is such a different world, right? This is how they communicate. I think families, as we have this conversation, again, addressing our family members in love and talking through what it means for them to, David, we use an acronym called RESET. So we look at our relationships, responsibilities, our enjoyment, sleep, emotions, and time, and go, is it negatively impacting that? So in my life, I struggled with gaming. It was a real big deal about 9 years ago, and I can't just moderate it. I'm not able to just go, well, I just won't play as much because it just
what was your game? What were you into?
I'm an RPG role-playing game person. I
Okay.
loved so I'm like an Elder Scrolls,
Elder
Oblivion,
Scrolls,
yeah, Skyrim kind
Oblivion.
of thing. So
Okay.
World of Warcraft, any of that stuff was my jam. And it was the
Right.
social aspect and then the leveling aspect that you're part
And
of
were
this
you
epic
were on
story.
headphones and you were talking to the other, you were in a
Well, I
clan
mean,
or a
9 years
guild?
ago, that wasn't as big a deal. There was still a lot of type text communication where you would have
Hmm.
like hotkey, I need help, and it would do it for you kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was the draw, right? You could be part of this massive adventure. You could be part of it. And
Yeah.
for me, I had to recognize, right, this conviction of, man, the Lord, this isn't going to send me to hell, but I am absolutely
No.
living handcuffed. And I'm not living in the complete freedom or the complete fruit of what God is asking me to do. And so that's my encouragement, especially in the spouse side of like, you're not going to be able to argue that spouse into stopping, but you can
No.
help them see that you love them and that them being more present is only going to extend that love, right? Like you're not going to quit loving them, but it's making it hard or it's unhealthy or whatever. And I think just what you said, right? That bringing them to the point of like, we love you and you have amazing potential. And like, these are the things that are hurting that. And it's not all video games, right? Social media is what it is for some people. Pornography is far more toxic and addictive and
Yes.
unhealthy. It's just generally more poisonous. But I love that, just that point that you bring up of bring them to the conversation, help them talk through what they're attracted to, and then remind them of kind of what they're giving up because of that. I think to kind of end on this, and I appreciate just kind of this conversation had, I'd love to know two questions. And this is one is my question that I kind of look at with all tech, and the other one is one of the questions we get the most. We'll start with that. When should when should parents give their child a smartphone?
When they're 36.
Okay.
If
All right.
if they're ready.
Okay.
No, I mean I've heard different things. There's a popular website called Wait Until Eighth,
Okay.
which is eighth grade. A lot
Okay.
of them are saying. Some say high school, some say 16. When traditionally it was give them the car keys at 16. Well, no, kids don't drive anymore; they Uber. So the thing would be to give them a smartphone at 16. Uh, there's really no hard and fast rule on that I've heard. I don't know if there's been some basic research done on that, but I would say the later the better. I think the most important thing that a parent could do when their kids are young is to set realistic limits when the kid is before they've established the habit of giving them tablets. For example, the kid has to know that every tech device in the house belongs to the parents. There are no personal devices. You don't want to give a little kid a tablet ever. 42% of 8-year-olds have their own personal tablet. Now, you know that these tablets are locked down, they got the parental controls on, but that's still teaching kids to go to a screen for entertainment rather than go out in the woods, rather than go into the kitchen. Their creativity, their creative juice is going onto the screen. And so it's going to be much harder for those parents once their kids reach smartphone age. Hey, they've had their own tablet for 5 years. Why shouldn't I give them a smart device? And there are a lot of really good products that are coming out of the market. Disney has one. There's one called Bark, and these will, if you are going to give your kids a device, it takes random screenshots of what your kid is doing online, and it also can flag anything like suicidal ideation or different keywords that you can put in, and it monitors your kids' device use even when they're away from the house.
Yeah.
So I would definitely put some of those, look into those sorts of products, and I'm going to put that up at my website, davidmurrow.com, and you can find a list of them there.
Awesome. Yeah, parents, go check those out. And we've talked about several of those, including Covenant Eyes as one of the opportunities.
Covenant Eyes, I should have mentioned that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great accountability software.
Yeah, it's the one I personally use, and I encourage all the
Excellent.
guys in my small group to use. And it's one of it, that nice balance between accountability and control, right? Like it still lets you be the one making the decisions, but you're never alone, just like Jesus promised.
Terrific product. Yeah.
Yeah. So then my second question kind of off that would be in your perspective, with your experience, both professionally and as a kind of speaking voice into this area, Would you say that technology for families, and for Christian families in this case, is a net gain or a net loss? Is it more trouble than it's worth?
I would say technology, if properly managed by parents and properly used by kids, is definitely a gain. The ability to communicate, to reach out, to meet people, wholesome, manage wholesome relationships, to provide entertainment in a safe environment at home. These are all net gains. And I just think we have to be very careful about the amount of screen time we're giving our kids and the content that they're seeing. And I think if we can manage those things properly, then it's definitely a gain.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, David. So, listening audience, this is David Murrow. He has a book coming out December 28th, 2020, called Drowning in Screen Time, A Lifeline for Adults, Parents, Teachers, and Ministers Who Want to Reclaim Their Real Lives. Thank you, David, for your time and for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you've been listening to this and you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly, nathan@flintandiron.org. I would love to kind of be a part of your family's conversation. If you want to know more about how can you create a family tech framework, check out the Gospel Tech online workshop. It was designed specifically with that in mind. There is a digital PDF version and a physical workshop booklet you can use to help your family answer big tech questions, both on the is our tech healthy side, and then how do we make this family tech framework? How do we designate when and where and how we should use tech for our family? It walks you through that. You can just go gospeltechworkshop.com to find that. And really, you can find us on social media as well. You can go to at Love God Use Tech on Facebook and Instagram, where you will find kind of daily reminders on this conversation, articles, blog posts, as well as guests like David Murrow, who help us kind of walk through this conversation. So thank you for being here. Please do reach out if you have questions. Tell your friends, share this. It helps us reach more people. And thank you so much for being a part of this conversation as we talk through how can we better love God and use tech.